Good afternoon, esteemed friends. We are glad to welcome you at the 10th Gaidar Forum, and we are glad that you managed to come here to the session dedicated to sports in the system of modern international relations, convergence or pressure, and sports as a means of addressing social problems. So let me apologize from the outset that we are a little bit delayed. That's why, without any further procrastination, let me introduce to our participants and guests, and after that we'll proceed with the discussion of the items of the agenda. So, please welcome Igor Levitin, President of the All Russia's Federation of Gymnastics, Ms. Viner-Usmanova.
Gymnastics.
State Duma Deputy responsible for CIS, Mr. Zaymurov. President of the Supervisory Anti-Doping Agency and Managing Partner of Ernst & Young, Vladimir Ivlev. Ex-Minister of SPA of Krasnodar region, Christopher Konstantinidi. And 3 times Olympic champion, Maria Kiselova. She doesn't need any introduction, certainly. And Ambassador Plenipotentiary Mr. Nesterenko. I suggest that we proceed immediately to the topic at hand, sports as a tool to address social issues. Let us start with Igor. Mr. Levitin, development of the sports industry, does it help to address the social problems in the country? And the very system which actually is being built from the children's sports to the elite sport. How does it work in Russia? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would like to thank you for the invitation to take part in that forum, in that discussion. Let me also say that sport, first and foremost, is about the upbringing of a man. And so the athletes, the sportsmen who attained the record results, they are the ones who are in the elite sports. This is actually a separate topic. But now we're speaking about the physical education and physical culture as sports. And the lessons of the physical training or physical education, which are helpful to develop children's body. These lessons are not enough. That's why we have to build the whole system of bringing up physical training and physical education, so that this is not just the headache of parents and the teachers of physical training. If we treat sports the way that it helps to develop a man, to help him mature, not only his sports component, then we will all understand that sports and culture. This is about the physical culture and their cultural capabilities, and it may help people feel at ease everywhere, because people who do sports, they feel at ease everywhere in the most stressful situations, because this develops endurance and perseverance and persistence, the capability to respond and the capability to negotiate. These factors, these skills are trained by sports. In his May decrees, which were signed by the president, we may also find the National Project of Physical Culture and Training Development, and the decree says that 55% of the Russia's population should consistently, let me stress this word, consistently do sports. And if you do your maths correctly, this is more than half of the population of the country. And how do we achieve it? And this is what we're going to discuss now. Ms. Wiener, how do we achieve the goals which are highlighted by the May decrees, taking into consideration your experience, the experience of organizing, arranging, and developing the systems which are implemented in gymnastics for athletes starting from age of 3. How does it work? Any challenges and difficulties you face? What results you may achieve? What can be improved? Can you share your experience that this is not merely some targeted or sporadic experience? I would also like to thank the organizers for the invitation to take part in that August forum, where very important, very respected people are present, people with a say in economics and politics. And actually, your question is about the fact that both politics and economics depend on children, and actually everything would depend on children. And the love for children, this is the love which would make children healthy, strong, and depending on that, they may be either successful or not successful. Yes, we certainly monitored and kept track of the children's development when it is appropriate to start doing sports, and we came to the conclusion that the earlier the better. Dr. Spock, who wrote a book on sports education, saw parents coming to him and they asked, when did you deliver the child? And actually, the parents said that the baby is 2 weeks old. And Dr. Spock said, you are late, meaning that you have to start doing sports much earlier. You don't have to be scared by the age of 3. At the age of 3, baby starts actually moving very fast. And for instance, if you take a boxer and the kid replicates his moves for 2 hours, then a professional boxer actually after those 2 years would fall down tired, whereas a child would be still moving. If a child is used to doing that, to doing sports, when it becomes his alter ego, his second habit, then probably a child will not make the professional athlete, but he will not do without sports. He will not live without some training, and bad habits actually would be secondary. It would become his good habit. Afterwards, a child would go to school, and schools should have very well developed infrastructure such as gyms, sport yards. These things are mandatory for every school at the moment. And unfortunately, there are no moments of truth when, for instance, huge facilities would be built and sports yards would account only for 1% of what's being built. That's awful, because once a child is back home from school, he has to have some space for doing sports, for playing certain games, and after that, actually, such a space would be passed over to his parents and to the parents of his parents. We have to have such facilities which would be appropriate for people of different age. There is such a story that we have to promote this project in terms of building such sports facilities, which have to embrace both little kids and their parents. Apart from that, there are other things which were mentioned by Mr. Medvedev. He spoke about fried eggs, and at school, for instance, according to our old standards, you can swim in the swimming pool only starting from 11 a.m. This is wrong. This is what we have to revise, to change. At schools, we have excellent PT teachers who used to be athletes, professional sportsmen. Unfortunately, now, in the pedagogical universities, actually, students who graduated from these universities, they would be educated as a teacher only, so he cannot be a coach. And a student who graduates from the physical education, physical training institute can be only a coach, not a teacher. Why not? So we have to train them both in both those qualifications everywhere. We have to see more sports grounds, and it would be not only about doing sports, but also about bringing up physical culture. In parks in the cities, we don't have any lighting, so people who want to do sports, they have to do that in darkness. And only then probably we'll not achieve the figure of 55% of people doing sports by 2024, but the number of children who would start doing sports from age of 3 would certainly follow that trend. What problems are there in the process of implementation of the goals? What we have to look at? I would like to take advantage of the example which was just quoted by Ms. Viner-Usmanova. So pedagogical educational universities are guided by the Ministry of Education. That's why the certificate cannot state that they are coaches, whereas the institutes of sports, they train only coaches, and they cannot state in the certificate, graduation certificate, that these are the teachers. So these are these two ministries which have to agree on the final qualifications. This is just one of the examples. So I do think that the problem is in the consistency of implementation of the May decrees. At the moment, we are getting prepared for the Council on Sports. One of the working groups will be kindly headed by Ms. Usmanova, and this council will prepare all the issues to be addressed first and foremost. If we fail to do that, then by 2024 we will not implement the May decrees. Let's speak about the consistency and streamlined nature. Why actually cannot do sports after classes at school, at those sport grounds? Because you will not be just allowed to be at the school grounds after lessons, and in some towns or some villages with no other sports facilities but the school ones, actually, children cannot go there after classes because there are some security guys preventing them to penetrate. We have to somehow remove the red tape, administrative barriers when the sport ground would be subordinated to certain authorities and they impose their own rules. I regret very much the whole situation, my pity for the children who cannot do sports at the schools, sports grounds after the classes. I do think that lack of communication between different departments and ministries, this is the problem which we have to address first and foremost. What personnel we are lacking in the system when we are working with the children, with the professional sportsmen? What we can address when preparing for the meeting of the Council on Sports? Sports among students probably is not in its best situation if we compare that to the Soviet Union period of time. Well, Mr. Levitin just spoke about that, and while he was speaking, it occurred to me, I remembered my teacher of philosophy at school, and he said, who invented who? A man invented nomenclature, or this is the nomenclature which invented the man? So this is our case. If it happens so, it means that we have a very strong leader, political leader of the country, which may turn everything upside down, and he has his assistants or aides, as Mr. Levitin, who can report about certain problems, so that the political leader could take certain decisions. As for the students' sports, actually, it doesn't exist at all. It's non-existent. Because, for instance, the students' games or Universiade, I, as the national manager of the national team, am approached and I'm asked, so today we have Universiade, and which of the professional students or professional athletes are also studying at universities or institutes? So let it be this, this, and this. And so there are now students, athletes. And for instance, in the Soviet period of time, we had an association of Burevestnik, and every rector would take pride of the fact that his students are taking part in some championships, and that Burevestnik would take certain places. That university would be won by his or her students, so this doesn't happen any longer. We just assemble a team of those who we can lay our hands on. Overseas, we have excellent bases, sports bases, which are kept on the balance sheet of the universities. And I talked today to the higher education minister, and the minister said that professional athletes do not study well. No, this is not true. I have Olympic champions in my team who would have several higher education diplomas. And in Barcelona, I was told, Irina, athletes cannot skip school. In Great Britain, athletes cannot skip school or dodge school, so but on the contrary, so once actually English students started winning medals immediately, a special approach was used and they could take exams afterwards. A special curriculum or special schedule would be developed for all the school-age students, and all our athletes may enter any institute they want. I do think that we have to engage the university sports or student sports, and the winners from among the students have to be propagated, and the rectors who do a lot for student sports should somehow be praised. If students are doing sports and they would be tired by the end of the training, and they will not have time to go to some nightclubs. And for instance, my athletes and their fans abroad are singing the Russian national anthem because they are improving the image of the country abroad. The biggest punishment for my kids is when I say, your place is at a disco. And so this is the most awful swearing. Although sometimes I would bring them to the discos with some security guys and some accompanying people. They have their own private life at the same time, so everything should be in a complex. Students is an important link because these are would-be parents, and parents would actually bring up their children the way they were brought up. This is true of universities and schools. Sports and physical training classes should be arranged 2 times a week, along with philosophy, physics, and mathematics. This is not right. You cannot do sports only 2 or 3 times a week. We have to change thinking and mentality in this way. If we really want a man to be strong, healthy, and literate at the same time, he should keep himself fit. This is true of all the school children and undergraduates. if we have only 2 lessons of physical education at school and that's it. So that's not right. And this is at this council meeting that we're going to discuss it. Sorry for interruption. Apart from the national programs, we have also international programs, UNESCO and United Nations programs. What role does Russia play in the implementation of those projects? Probably Mr. Levitin, you are the right person to answer this question. Russia takes an active part in the implementation of those programs. All the time we are discussing all the sessions and meetings dedicated to sports. Last year, Russia held one of the sessions, one of the meetings, and one of the sessions was dedicated to sports. Russia took an active part there. We were discussing regulations and laws and bylaws. We are quite active in that respect. The whole world knows that we have special trained people, lawyers, foreign ministry, diplomats, who are monitoring constantly the situation to see what emerges in terms of the legislation governing sports. And sadly, this is mostly true of the elite sports, and our internal rules, such as sports and physical education, they are governed by the regulations proposed by our ministries. It goes without saying that student sports and children's sports and professional sports actually would be assessed and praised only by the results shown at the Olympic Games and the World Cups. Such major events which are held by this or that country, which would bring certain results to the hosting country and to the guests, would also influence the bilateral relations and the international relations. In your opinion, the sports events which were held in Russia, such as Sochi Olympic Games and the World Cup, did they influence the image of Russia, because Russia was ready to arrange the best games of the whole history of the Olympic Games, and so the World Cup was a success and it was admitted by FIFA and UEFA? Did it somehow result in the improvement of relations between Russia and other countries? I don't think that you answered the question. Russia held the best Winter Olympic Games in Sochi and one of the best World Cups. But generally speaking, and the president spoke about that, this is what we're doing for ourselves, not for other people. Look at what happened to Sochi. Sochi, which didn't have any sewage, which didn't have clean water supply, which didn't have sports grounds and sports facilities. After the Olympic Games, this is one of the best resort places. Any time of the year. Look at Sochi. So there are no vacant rooms in the hotels of Sochi. World Cup, for instance. The city of Saransk, Samara. These are the cities where the people got an opportunity to do sports and to promote physical culture. I do think that programs are crucial. Krasnoyarsk is totally ready to hold Winter Universiade. And Universiade would last for 2 weeks only, but for the people who are living there, this would last forever. These are such events which are supported by the president, by the ministers. These are major games, big games, and it seems to be very expensive, but actually we're doing that at home. It would remain for the use of our people. After the World Cup, I think that Russia was presented differently, especially by those who couldn't think that Russia is such a hospitable country. For instance, Russia's foreign ministry actually provided visa-free regimen for those who have football fan ID. It was unprecedented. All the countries which are planning to host World Cups, they would like to replicate that. It was a novelty proposed by the Russian Federation. So people used to think that Russia is a very close country and you have to do a lot of verifications and checks and will never enter this country. But on the contrary, once you obtain a fan ID, you can go without any visa to that country for 1 year. So it means that Russia is a very open country. Mr. Konstantinidi, Krasnodar region, which thanks to the Olympic Games in Sochi got an impetus in terms of the infrastructure development. Now, 4 years after Sochi Olympic Games, do you think it still works, and did it really attract tourists and guests to the region? Dear colleagues, I would like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank the organizers for their kind invitation to such a crucial and interesting discussion with such prominent speakers. Speak about the impact of the Olympic Games and the World Cup in soccer. I just think that we were lucky, meaning that those two mega projects, two mega events, were held in Krasnodar region. First of all, it contributed to the promotion of the region, of the city and the country in general, thanks to those events. And it certainly resulted in more tourists coming to the Krasnodar region. And we really managed to showcase Russia as a country with a rich culture and history. To the tourists, foreign tourists could witness that we are a very hospitable country, a modern one, a technologically developed one, ready to receive guests. And certainly we have built a unique engineering infrastructure, tourist infrastructure and sports infrastructure. Sports facilities certainly are in demand, and there is a potential for, so to say, more utilization in the high season and in the low season. We may arrange for more events of a regional level, of the federal level, business events, scientific and entertainment ones, and the Olympic Park, for instance. This is a center of gravity for the tourists. Over the 4-year period of time, we received more than 9 million tourists, and this has become a separate touristic attraction. So you may hold global events, but without a modern hotel chains, this cannot be done. We built more than 40 new hotels in the preparation for the Olympic Games. It means that such huge events as the International Youth Festival were made possible not only due to the sports facilities, but also due to a very well-developed hotel industry and infrastructure. Hyatt, Radisson, Hilton, and many other prominent five-star hotels are present in the Krasnodar region. Another thing I would like to note is the impact on the social and economic development. Many people assess differently and differently approach the budget efficiency and social significance. They believe that the money you spend is not the money you earn. They do different calculations, but this is a common opinion that strategically these are very beneficial projects.
And to confirm this, we can mention the two global projects which we have mentioned here. The Sochi Olympics. Now the roads of the region are such that they can allow to conduct the year-round a great number of various sports events like mountain ski events, sea holidays, and also event tourism. And the second mega project, the World Cup. There were no so many constructions of specialized infrastructure objects, facilities, but a lot has been done in order to make several regions of the country more hospitable for tourists, and now all the things that have been done there have very much encouraged the economic development of the relevant regions. As for the key branches of the tourist industry, these are things like transportation, park catering, hotel accommodation, etc. And this allows to accommodate many more foreign tourists. For example, in Krasnodar, there has been an explosion of international tourism, a 300% growth. And the reactions by the teams and by the fans, I have spoken personally to them. Well, they are over-enthusiastic over what they have seen and experienced. So the mega projects, both for the Krasnodar Krai and for the country as a whole, are of colossal importance, and we would be very glad to accommodate similar large-scale events, to host similar large-scale events in our region. You've had a chance. The boxing, the World Championship was was transferred to Sochi, but so the competition. You see the competition. We are ready for events of such scale, and I would like to ask Ms. Viner-Usmanova. She's a 3 times world champion. She has visited a lot of sports events, has taken part in them. So how does the country's image change after such large-scale sports events? Well, thank you for this question and for the invitation to speak here. I think that the esteemed speakers have already answered this question. It makes country more attractive. It shows its opportunities. We all feel this, and there are many more events conducted in this country than we have spoken about them. We have mentioned the Sochi Olympics and the World Cup, but the Universiade in Kazan, which has already taken place, and the future one in Krasnoyarsk, and lots of other events have been conducted at a very excellent level. So we have a lot of potential, a lot of capacity. Our capacity is limitless, we can say so. And this is not just improvement of our standing in the world. It does not just change international people, the attitude of people from various countries to our country, because they came here rather uneasy, not knowing what to expect, and went home enthusiastic about the country. But it is also a lot of makes people respect their own country. People see what is being done, and people who are not very much interested in sports begin to be interested by taking part in such events, by attending mass events and seeing famous sportsmen and sportswomen. So I think that the fashion of mass sports and physical culture has been developed over the latest years by thanks to these projects and also to the general policy of the state. I think all these factors work, and we can also contribute. We, those who have been sportsmen and sportswomen, we can also contribute. Some children start doing this at the age of 3, others at the age of 5, and so the country, the organization, the regions where we were trained invested a lot in us, and so it's high time we gave it back to other children, to other people, to other population, and we can do it by our personal efforts, by our personal examples, by working towards popularization of sports and physical culture in general. We are doing that, and I'm grateful that in this country things are developing this way, and that we can realize ourselves by contributing to this development. We are little cogs in this great machine, and we are happy that we can continue doing what we have been doing all our life. Andrei Alexeyevich, please tell us if there is some connection between great sports and great politics. I think it's important, when we have such large-scale international events. For the foreign ministry, such huge events as the Olympics and the World Cup are really a big job to do. And so how does it help all this work? What are the results of it? Esteemed participants of the discussion, thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for having invited me to this event, and I will answer your question with pleasure. First of all, I would like to say that the subject of our discussion has been chosen very well, and the answer to the question is obvious. The sports is sports convergence of pressure. I would say that obviously it's both things. Of course, it is convergence for those people who regard sports as completely non-political contests. As for pressure, yes, over the latest years it has become the norm for the forces that have been conducting a Russophobic policy. They are using, or they have been using, sports as a tool of putting up pressure on our sportsmen and sportswomen, creating difficulties for them in order to prevent them from taking part in international competitions. As for the big-time policy, I would say that sport was introduced by force into big-time policy. And now it is being used by those who are in power in a great number of countries that are not really friendly towards the Russian Federation, and also by certain international sports organizations. They have been trying to put up as many obstacles as they can for our sportsmen and sportswomen to take part in international competitions on an equal footing with other country sportsmen. Fake news has been produced, fake reports have been put into circulation, and the media takes them up in those countries which I have been talking of, mostly the countries of the Western Hemisphere, as we used to call them. And thus, public opinion in such countries has been formed, or is being formed. Some fake news invented by unscrupulous journalists is put on in circulation, and it affects the consciousness of the population of the country in question. And there are quite a lot of such news produced. We hear them, we read them, and the positive things which could be said about our sports, there are lots of such positive things, are passed over in silence, and negative things are being very much discussed. We know the consequences of the so-called McLaren report, and the scandal has not yet is not yet over. We are doing our best to overcome this situation, this invented problem of doping. And talking of this particular problem, we should say that the subject of doping should be discussed as quite legitimate. Yes, for quite a number of years, a great number of various substances have been used by sportsmen and sportswomen to increase their achievements, and some of these substances have been proclaimed doping. As for Western sportsmen and sportswomen, they use the use of such substances called put on the list of doping by WADA, well, is passed over in silence. One of the examples is that Norwegian skiers use such substances which should not be approved by the WADA as substances, legitimate substances, but the athletes say that they suffer from asthma, and that such substances are medicines against asthma which allow them to go through the competitions. As for the big-time politics, the sports do affect for a certain in a certain degree international politics. So, although some political leaders might understand that the sports must not be used as a tool of political pressure, but they put up pressure on the relevant organizations in order to introduce politics in sports. As for the level of ordinary people, sports is regarded as a way of life which allows to people to show their courage, their patience, their perseverance, and it does bring people closer to each other. It is really convergence. We have already spoken about the World Cup in this country, and here we could give quite a lot of comments, very positive comments, and I believe that if any person goes into the internet and looks up the comments on this festival of sports, everything would be quite obvious. We have learned that the British ambassador in Moscow on the eve of the World Cup has conducted a closed press briefing, which has leaked to journalists of the British media credited in Moscow, and during that briefing he presented the following concept. They should be very careful while covering the World Cup, because Russia is an aggressive country, that in Russia there is no good communication system, that fans will have difficulties in communication with Russian fans, because Russian fans are extremely aggressive, that they will start fights, that the country is incapable of putting up all the people, to accommodate all the people who would come, that we have, that Russia has difficulties with water supply, and so it prevented many British fans from coming to this country. But they came later. Just less than a week has passed, and those fans who did brave the presumed perils and the official admonitions by London came to Russia. Those fans posted their comments on the internet, and the fans who had been scared were surprised by such comments and wanted to go and come and see Russia. And here you see there are fans who have come not for the two mega events, but who come also to the various league championships like the Basketball EuroLeague and other similar events. And here I would like to ask you, Vladimirovich, whether the integration of sports in the national and international level, and if we look at the rest of the world, like at things like the Chinese expansion into international sports, like into the Italian football, is also policy using sports. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having invited me. It is for the second time that I am taking part in the sports section of the Gaidar forum. Talking of how the fans react to the participation of their favorite team. Well, I have been present. I was present at the Russia-Canada competition in Vancouver, which we lost unfortunately 7-3. And we heard that Canadian fans were shouting, "We want Russia! We want Russia!" And in reality, when we see how our fans receive, for example, Canadian fans in Sochi, it's different. So when guests of our competitions, they change their attitude to our country and to our people because they are something to compare with. As for the use of force of sports as soft power, just like arts, well, of course, sports is an integral part of soft power. Just take the example of China. At the fourth Congress of the Communist Party of China, in 2004, they said we want to promote China using culture and sports and arts, and so they launched the Confucius Center, just like the Germans launched the Goethe Center, or the British launched the British Council. And so they began to popularize Chinese sports at the international level, and we saw them develop the Football League. We saw Chinese investors grow to international markets. For example, if we look at the British Premier League, we'll see that China spent about $20 million on the right to broadcast international matches. For the next year, they concluded a contract for about $700 million, and now about half of clubs which belong to other investors now belong to investors from Asia. Okay, and John Kennedy in his time said that the status of a modern power is established by two things: the number of warheads and the number of sports team of sports medals. So now sports is a tool to promote the interests of countries at the international level, and we have done something in this way. For example, the Sochi Olympics, but as regards to the economic effect, it was the World Cup which has brought the best results. As for the Sochi Olympics, well, you know, our non-friends abroad said, yes, Russians can do something good in one little place, but not all over the country. But the World Cup has proved that we have managed to organize a best quality top event all over the country. If in Sochi we have created the infrastructure in one place, we now during the World Cup we managed to create it all over the country. Here, Laura Bristol's briefing has been mentioned, and the British said really that the World Cup has been something unexpected for them. It has shown how we can organize things and manage the whole process, the whole project. Talking of objectives, which we have globally at the level of international sports, there are two things we should address. First of all, big money will not form the agenda of both mass sports and professional sports or high achievement sports, because now we often see that some regulations are being shaped. NHL, for example, the principles of the World Anti-Doping Agency are not used. They live in their own world. When they go to international Olympics, they allow to take doping tests. Otherwise, they live independently. There are some other entities which do the same. For example, some rich European sports clubs do not want to play against average football clubs. There is Bavaria, there is Barcelona, Tottenham, etc. Very big names, and various Ike, Spikes, and Eindhovens are not their level, and so they say, let's have our own Super League and play among ourselves, and let them play among themselves. And I believe that these two things can negatively affect, if the trend continues, on the international development of sports and the conduct of sports events. And the second thing, based on what I see in international economy and politics, is that international organizations begin to depart from international regulations set up initially. You see how dysfunctional and helpless is the United Nations. It was conceived as an instrument that would shape international politics, but you see that the Security Council does not work really. We see that the regulations are being trampled down by the key players who had written actually these regulations. One of the objectives in the world of sports, you know, the sports is connected with politics, but we should make sure that those regulations that have been established, that have been drawn up based on a painful experience, be complied with. And my colleagues would not understand me if you don't answer the question, is everything okay with the commission which is working in Moscow? We are waiting for the morning, we are waiting for the 22nd. Well, we always wait for the morning. I am the chairman of the Council of the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, and the Russian Anti-Doping Agency is not an affiliated agency, but interaction with the international anti-doping access can be continued. Experts have been given the given access, and will be waiting for the decision by the compliance committee. Mr. Zinurov, what do you think? When such big sports events go on in Russia, like the World Cup, the Olympics, etc., how does this affect you as a representative of Russia and of the State Duma? Thank you very much for having invited me to such an important event. As for the significance of international sports events, well, I can tell you as a representative of Kazan and Tatarstan, I could say that the Universiade Games has given a very big impetus for the development of Kazan and of Tatarstan. A lot of, for example, swimming pools have been built in order to host water sports events and other facilities. And Kazan also hosted partly the World Cup. And I am a sportsman and a representative of the State Duma. People ask me what is the level at which such events are conducted. Even those people who have not attended such events, and they regret that they have not come to these events because of the propaganda. And you have said at the beginning about the significance of competitions. When I was coming here, I saw the inscription, the Olympic Village of 1980. In my childhood, I watched the 1980 Olympic Games together with my grandmother. I saw, for example, the swimmer Stalnikov, etc., and I became a sportsman. I became inspired, and sports has proved a social lift for me. One could think that sports and physical exercise does not really have anything to do with politics. But even the founder of the Olympic Games, Baron de Coutin, is considered to be an apolitical person, but that's not quite true. And scholars have begun in the 1940s, 1950s to study the influence of sports on politics. And they have found that the sports is an important tool. It was shown, for example, after the First World War, for example, the Olympic Games, where some Olympic Games were boycotted. At the same time, political figures began to use sports to build up their images, the national idea. For example, a sportsman is an idol, is a hero with his own Austerlitz or something else, and something for our political leaders to imitate.
This has become a national idea. And this is actually a comparison of different social systems which we inherited from the previous ages. At the time, the Americans, when they started in the 1950s, they said that sports, this is a mirror of our American life. And then they have made it the second phase and the second belief, as that Americans are believing in sports. In the Soviet Union, sports has become our religion too. And I've become a politician myself, and step by step I went from sports to politics. I've become a politician, and so that's very right. And Marie Kisleva spoke right about that. And the future should depend on the politicians and sportsmen. I'm member of Ms. Rodnina's group, the All Russia's School Federation, and athletes have to gather around school. There should be more sports facilities where children could do sports, and a coach should be a teacher at the same time. That goes without saying. In our Federation of School Sports, we have a separate vector, which we call the Bridges of Friendship. These are the games among the fellow countrymen, the CIS festival. 6 events have already been arranged this year. I would like to mention the city of Kazan. And we had the first and the second games of fellow countrymen in Sochi. And we have more games for school-age children, which housed athletes from more than 70 to 80 countries. And when they go back, they act as ambassadors of Russia. They communicate to one another, they find new friends. This is about diplomacy, this is soft power. And as was said, this is not just about a soft power, but we call it smart power. We have to take advantage of that smart power. Irina, getting back to smart and soft power. Your unique methodology is being used for more than a decade, very successful in terms of how to bring up children from age of 3 doing gymnastics. Can this your unique branded methodology be used as a means of soft power? Can it be exported? Ms. Wiener. Yes, sadly. Foreign coaches certainly took advantage of my methodology, and after that, actually, we embarked on that ourselves, because it cannot be done otherwise. For Ms. Vasilyeva, the Minister of Education and Science, sanctioned it, authorized it, that children from the grade 1 should do sports, and a PhD thesis was obtained by Ms. Gabaeva in St. Petersburg on that topic. We have rock and roll, ballet dance, aerials. These things are being implemented, but another thing, we have a shortage of infrastructure, the facilities, which would accommodate those little kids. If such things cannot be arranged in the sports facilities. So these sports facilities should accommodate both children and their parents. And for instance, in the morning, these kids do some sports, and then I said they have to be complemented by their parents, unfortunately. Let me repeat it again. We have to put an end to giving opportunity to the constructors to build those sports facilities without consideration of who they are taking care of. And there should be more buildings, residential buildings, built with more sports grounds. Those tiny sports grounds in the middle of 25 or 30 floor buildings. That's awful. For instance, in Michurinsky Avenue, you see skyscrapers, and between them there is just a tiny sports ground, which can accommodate only 10-15 children. That's awful. That's not right. I do believe that the administration of our country, especially the ministers of construction, Mr. Mutko, have to take care of that. That the permit to construct is granted only to the projects where 20-25% of the territory is occupied by the sports facilities, so that children and their parents can do more sports. I'm living exactly there, and actually there would be one hockey ground and 3 52-story buildings. So, question about the career to be done, to be made by the professional athletes. Will sports, for instance, help you in making your career after sports? Can we export this good, this product? Can we bring it to Spain or to Italy, where synchronous swimming be used? Actually, in essence, I would like to note that, in my opinion, and according to the estimates of other analysts, the most difficult period of athletes' time, especially the ones who set records, this is the end of their career. This is the most difficult period of their time. Because at the moment, when athletes are members of the national teams, when they're getting prepared for the competitions, they set goals, they have certain dreams, and the goals being set for you. So an athlete within the sports plays a secondary role. He cannot do anything without a coach. But once they are done with the sports, most of the athletes are not prepared for their career after sports. And I would like to thank the coaches who are making a focus on that, and the organizations who are doing a lot for athletes, that athletes should think about their future life once the sports is done. So when actually there is no longer a coach who tells you you have to go there or there, this season you have this goal, and next season you have another goal. So all of a sudden, professional athletes are on their own, and no one is giving their bearing. This is one of the most difficult periods of time. It's good when you understand, when you know where to develop. It's good when you have certain education, and a lot of athletes, still being athletes, find it possible to obtain higher education, and a good one. And after that, this springboard, this step given by the sports may help you in future if you are prepared for the fact that not always it will be given by granted. You should not take it for granted. Any profession but doing sports, this is very difficult. Many would think that a coach, being a coach or being a teacher or being an instructor, that any athlete can do that. No, by no means. This is a totally different set of skills. This is a totally different story. This is a totally different talent, which a person should have. You have to train that. And fortunately, it happens so that I can do in my life what I devoted all my life to. So there is a sports school which I had, and I can develop synchronized swimming, my favorite kind of sports. I can train athletes, boys and girls, because boys can do synchronized swimming too. And for the sports of records and for the mass sports, it can be done. And I'm lucky enough that I can be more creative. 15 years after I finished my sports career, we made a show of Olympic champions in synchronized swimming. So for the first time, we did this project in 2004, when me and Olga Brusnik and my partner, we wanted to say the word of gratitude to those who accompanied us there, who rooted for us. And there were more victories at the synchronized swimming at the World Cups and championships and the Olympic Games. We wanted to make this show alive. This project was approved and everyone liked it, and really it plays a lot in terms of popularizing these kind of sports, and we may take pride of what is being done to our sports. I know that the project which we invented 15 years ago was replicated by other sports too, and we are glad that this format is very much in demand. This is what we have to show not only in Russia, but have to show that abroad, because this is our soft power. This is something we can be proud of. And fortunately, I can develop further other projects, and for 10 years we are making water performances in order to combine arts and sports. And this is a very strong tool, again, in order to make water kinds of sports more popular. We are using our unusual language, but it is quite understandable for children. We are combining music and art. So in our show, we employ both professional athletes and professional artists. People come with their families to us, and every time we see such a joyful picture when children take their parents by hand and would ask them to enroll them to the synchronized swimming or water jump or whatever. So this is what we do, and we show our performances in different cities such as Moscow, St. Peter, and Kazan. In St. Petersburg, we started showing our project when water jump was not very popular, but now there is a queue there. There are a lot of very strong and very successful water jumpers, and many adults who didn't see big events, sport events, after attending our shows, our performances, would say, I would like to watch this event, what this competition. I want to see our athletes winning. I want to hear our Russian national anthem, which sounds every time a Russian athlete would win. This is something we have to show not only to the Russian nationals, but we have to bring that abroad to export it, because, again, this is how we develop. This is what level we can boast in our country. This is the sports which helps us to develop, and our show is about the sports of record, and this is about bringing together art and sports. The only problem which we see at the moment, this is about setting up the ground, setting up the theater where actually can be done, because sadly we do that at the sports ground, sports facilities. We try to do that during the New Year vacations, not to put an end to the training, or to suspend the training, but sadly we need some separate facilities so that foreign delegations could come and we could exchange this art. I'm glad that I can do my favorite business and popularize synchronized swimming here and there. So that's great that Yevgeny Plushchenko, Tatiana Navka, Alina Kibaeva, who every year arranges an excellent festival, and the Chinese want her to arrange that for them. A lot of people are arriving, and I see a lot of applications. And this is not about the Olympic champions, but this is about little kids who probably will never become Olympic champions and probably will never come to Moscow. But now they will go not only to Moscow, but they would go to abroad. Hopefully we'll see your ladies not only at Mariinsky Theater, but also in your new building, which will be inaugurated in June. Yes, I invite everyone present here and your friends in July, in the middle of July. We will host the Junior Gymnastics Championship. It will be held in a very hallmark stadium, Luzhniki. So the building which is not finished yet, but it has a very nice outlook. A golden ribbon. So this is where it would be held, not only for the gymnastics, but for other kinds of sports, for concerts, and even philharmonic concerts would be held there, because the acoustics was arranged by Mr. Gergiev, our famous conductor. Unfortunately, we have to free this room. So, present here is the president of the Olympic Movement Union, and there are hundreds of guys who finished their sports career would enroll to a special program supported by the president, the one held in the MGIMO and in Sochi. Over the last several years, the athletes who finished their professional career asked them to help them learn foreign languages and do some other courses. For athletes who finish their professional career, they may apply to the foundation to study languages and other courses. And finally, I would like to say that our moderator said that the main objective is to make our children set records, but the main objective of physical education is that our school children stay fit, ready to pass certain exams and get a special badge which certifies that they are fit for defense and labor. The badge is given to everyone under 70. The president said that 55% of the Russia's population should do sports continuously. If we think about politics, so let us remember our guys in Korea won the hockey game, and although we could not raise the national flag, and could not sing the national anthem, but once they started singing the anthem, and the music was different, and they were singing our anthem, and the whole room stood up. I'm not speaking about the fans from Russia, but everyone stood up to support our guys, our lads. You cannot stop a man who brought a victory to his country. I think that the Minister of Sports, that the Olympic champion in fencing, and fencing, this is about punching. I do think that they would respond the way actually they see that they are treated. Thank you so much.